Do you love TV shows? We do too. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff.
And I'm Anna, and we're the hosts of We Judge a Show by Its Pilot, a podcast hosted by us, a married couple with an endless love for TV.
Whether you're searching for a new favorite series or ready to revisit an old classic, we're here to guide you through an infinite world of TV shows.
Each episode, we watch and discuss the pilot for shows, while also sharing personal stories that parallel the storyline.
So if you're tired of endlessly scrolling and not sure what to watch next, tune in and let us do the searching for you.
We Judge a Show by Its Pilot. New episodes every Tuesday and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Your new favorite show is just one click away. Hello everyone, welcome back to our pod.
Hello, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. That's right. We're in the new year. We're recording this in the new year now.
Yes,
so
we are in the new year.
It is January 2nd.
Yes.
About to be January 3rd because it's almost midnight.
Yes, it is AOPI's Founders Day.
Aww.
Happy birthday, AOPI.
That's awesome.
We also do have a little bit of sad news, the terrible tragedy in New Orleans.
Yes.
So we don't want to forget that. But so we're thinking about everyone in New Orleans,
Yes,
my
we are.
hometown. And yeah, so today you just got home from work. It was a late night,
Yep.
but we're up recording.
Yep, we were originally going to record two, but we're just going to record one because I didn't think I was going to get home this late. So
Yeah, you had a new guy.
we have new busser. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
He's doing a good job. So yeah, I barely had to help him. So so we are continuing Fresh Start, New Beginnings, and I love that we unintentionally keep putting the titles, and we keep saying Fresh Start, New Beginnings. We did New Girl. Now we're doing Fresh Prince. So
Fresh starts.
kind of funny how it works out that way. But we are doing one of my all-time favorite shows, one of my first favorite shows I've talked about before. Looking for any excuse to talk about this show. I can't stress enough how much I love this show. It was just the first time where I was watching a show that was coming on primetime TV, and I was laughing at the jokes. I was understanding the jokes. I think that was a big thing, and I understood the references. It was just the first time where I felt like a show, I understood it. I think that was a good way to put it.
It resonated with you.
Right, and we'll get into more of that, but for now we're going to get into episode and series information, and if you want to go ahead and do that.
All right, let me take it away. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, The Fresh Prince Project. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was an American sitcom that premiered on NBC on September 10th, 1990 and ended on May 20th, 1996 after 6 seasons and 148 episodes.
It felt like it was on TV for so much longer than that.
Andy and Susan Borowitz are credited as the series creators, but it was music manager Barry Medina and his business partner Jeff Pollock who came up with the concept. Medina grew up in a poor area of East Los Angeles, but his life changed when he befriended a rich kid from Beverly Hills. His friend's family allowed Medina to move in with them. Medina decided to use this part of his life as the focal point of the series. However, given this point in the late 1980s, the concept of a young black kid living with an affluent white family had been done many times on TV. I mean, I can think of a couple at least,
Right.
Different Strokes, things
Webster.
like that, Webster. Medina thought it would be more interesting to change the rich family to an African-American family, and he thought it would be more interesting this way so that they could explore things most shows hadn't done, like prejudices against your own race and different class systems within that same race.
Never thought of that. I never thought of it that way.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Medina and Pollock went all over Hollywood to pitch the show, but it was the infamous Quincy Jones, who has recently passed away, that would pick up the series, and thought up-and-coming rapper Will Smith, also known as the Fresh Prince, would be perfect for the main role. Excuse me.
Take a sippy.
The series centers around William Will Smith, born and raised in West Philadelphia, who was relocated to live with his wealthy aunt and uncle in Beverly Hills.
In Bel-Air, sorry. I wrote Beverly Hills.
Oh, Bel-Air.
Yeah.
After his mother notices him going down the wrong path at home. The cast includes Will Smith as Will Smith, a fictionalized version of himself, James Avery as Philip Banks, Will's uncle and a successful attorney. Janet Hubert as Vivian Banks, Will's aunt and a literature professor at UCLA. The cast includes Will Smith as Will Smith, a fictionalized version of himself. James Avery as Philip Banks, Will's uncle and a successful attorney. Janet Hubert as Vivian Banks, Will's aunt and a literature professor at UCLA. Alfonso Ribeiro as the unforgettable Carlton Banks, his preppy conservative cousin. Karen Parsons as Hillary Banks, the oldest Banks child and Will's shallow, superficial cousin.
I mean, just a little.
She was probably one of my favorites.
Oh, total scene stealer. Total scene stealer.
Tatiana Ali as Ashley Banks, the youngest of the Banks children who idolizes Will.
So cute.
And the Banks' butler, Jeffrey, played by Joseph Marcel. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was an instant hit and has been a huge part of pop culture for the last 30 years, including the show's theme song, which might be one of the most catchy theme songs in TV history, and of course, the Carlton Dance, which was a dance Alfonso Ribeiro improvised that became his signature and his legacy.
I mean,
we love him too. We, as you know, love Dancing with the Stars, and he was on that, and he's now one of the hosts.
And he won when he did the finale, his freestyle. They did a remake of the Banks home, and he did the Carlton Dance with Whitney Carson.
Oh yeah. A more dramatic and updated reboot of the series called Bel-Air premiered on Peacock in 2020 and is currently filming its fourth and final season. You can currently watch the entire series on Max.
Yeah, I didn't know about the reboot. I didn't know that they had done that.
I think I vaguely saw something with it, but
maybe I did too.
Yeah, but I don't think it really piqued my interest at the time I noticed it. So, yeah. All right. Why is this one of your favorite shows?
Well, I kind of talked about it a second ago, but I would say that up until this point, the show came out in 1990. I probably didn't start watching until 92, 93, just because I was so young. I was like 5, almost 6 when the show started, and I wasn't really like looking for stuff to watch on TV. I was just watching whatever was on. And I would say that most sitcoms, particularly like the family sitcoms, really kind of geared more towards the adults, and the kids were often kind of like plot devices. They were more used for cute little one-liners or having very like basic, like I'm getting in trouble at school, or I have I have a crush on a girl. Like it's always just something very
minimal. C
story, like you have like the A plot, the B plot, the kid stories are usually like the C plot. It's like takes up 2 or 3 minutes of the episode. And the 90s, I felt like really changed that with the family sitcom, where you had shows like Boy Meets World and The Wonder Years and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and even like Full House and Family Matters, where the show where the kids got the A plots and the B plots and they were leading the show. And Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I felt like the young cast really carried the show. Of course, James Avery and Janet Hubert are amazing, and Joseph Marcel is hilarious, but like it really was, most people remember, other than Uncle Phil, people remember Will, they remember Carlton, they remember Hillary, they remember Ashley, they remember Jazz, they remember like, you know, the younger cast, because they were the ones who were really stealing all the scenes, having all the best jokes. Will Smith and Alfonso Ribeiro are like physical comedic geniuses. They're so funny, and it didn't insult the younger audience. I felt like it was we were being spoken to at our level, and they were talking about that for sure. I felt like it was us with our friends. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I 100% agree with that. It was very much like they were dealing with very controversial topics. They did talk about racism, and they did talk about homophobia, and they did talk about all these other topics, but they did it in a way that it made us listen, and it made us like understand that not everyone has it the same as you, and everyone has like a different struggle, and even the people that are really wealthy, they have their own struggles, and they have their own, you know, crosses they have to bear and all of that. And I just feel like the show did it. And also the show is just so funny. I mean, like, it's one of the funniest shows. Personally, I think one of the funniest shows ever made. And maybe it just spoke to my sense of humor. Maybe it just spoke to the millennial humor. I don't know. But it was just a show that every time I look back on it, I just remember sitting at home and like watching it with my sister or watching it with Tyler and us just cry laughing. We were laughing so hard.
Oh.
Just a bunch of just nothing but good memories of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And it's just a great show.
Yeah, I totally remember the song coming out. I think my sister actually heard it. I had heard it, and then I think my sister heard it and thought it was really funny. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, have you heard this song?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." So we listened to it, and then, the show came out, or I don't know if it was simultaneous or if like the song had come out before.
Yeah.
And they had decided to use Will Smith. I don't remember the whole
I think
story.
he wrote the song for the show, but I think
okay.
the single came out before the show did.
Got you.
I think that's what happened. Will goes to live with his uncle, and you have a story that's a little similar to that. That's
Yes.
actually very similar to that.
Yes, I do.
Different circumstances, but similar in the sense that your mother went to
Yes.
go live with your aunt and uncle, or just your uncle and your cousins, or
It was her aunt and uncle, her uncle, which was her mother's brother. So my mom was born and raised in Ecuador in South America, and my grandparents, my mom's parents, did not really have a lot of money. I mean, third world country, it's
Right.
a very poor country, and it still sadly is. And so she was the oldest of, I believe, 9 children.
oh wow,
And so when she came to school age, her parents had decided that she was going to go to live with her uncle, Enrique, and his wife. I think it was his first wife. I knew his second wife. But anyway, so that she could go to Catholic school.
okay,
Because he had offered to pay for my mom as the oldest to go to Catholic school, which was just
that's
something
awesome.
like my grandparents could not have afforded.
Right.
And so she moved with them. So she did not grow up really with her siblings. I
Okay.
mean, obviously she knew them and she was at home at certain times, but growing up in school, she went to Catholic school with
So all her years of schooling.
yes.
Okay.
And then when her uncle, and I will call him Tio Enrique, that's
Okay.
his name. So it was kind of like my great uncle. Moved to the United States, he sponsored her.
Oh, cool.
And she had actually moved first to New York. I don't know if I've talked about that on a pod before, but
Maybe.
the first place that she had moved to was New York, and she did not like it at all. And I believe she knew or learned that New Orleans, Miami had big Latin, Hispanic populations, and she chose to move to New Orleans.
Yeah.
She did not, I don't think she wanted to live in Miami for some reason. I don't remember why. And then she started sponsoring her siblings to move to the United States. And so she sponsored, because I think back in the 50s when my mom immigrated here in 1951, and in the mid 50s, you had to have a sponsor. You had to know someone that was already here that would kind of vouch for you. I don't know what the process is like today.
Yeah.
Honestly, I know obviously it's a huge issue in this country. But she sponsored all of her siblings that wanted to come, and she helped them come to move to various places around the country. So that was
That's
my
awesome.
mom moved to live with her uncle for a better chance at an education and a better chance at life here in the U.S. So, yeah.
She was the queen of Bel-Air.
She was the queen of New York City. No,
Oh, yeah.
New Orleans. But she did go to school in Ecuador and
Yeah.
then moved here.
I didn't know what city it was, so I just said Bel-Air.
Yes. So it was in Ecuador that she went to school and high school, whatever it is called there.
Right.
And she moved here in 1951 when she was 20.
I think they call high school college.
Yes, it's colegio.
Colegio.
And you go to La Universidad
Yeah.
is university.
Yeah, I remember I was friends with a bunch of people from Peru and Chile and Florida, and we talked about that. And college and university are two completely different things,
Yes.
and they're the same in America. All right, so why do we think this show had such an impact on pop culture? Do you think it was just having a catchy theme song? Do you think it was just the time, right place? Like, what do you think?
Oh, well, I definitely think it was a combo. And I'm going to get like my years and, groups and things maybe wrong here.
Yeah.
So again, as I always say, do not come at me in the comments, but you can if you want to straighten me out. But like, I feel like rap music and all of that was really new. I mean, it had been around, but things like MTV,
Yeah.
music videos, all of this were just really putting it out in the forefront. I mean, you were just seeing all of these new acts, LL Cool J, Run
yeah.
DMC, Fresh Prince. I mean, they were just in your face, and it was because of MTV.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this intro, as I said in the intro of the show, it was famous.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was just saw the playing basketball,
Yeah.
b-ball with my boys, and then you see him, jumping in the car, heading to Bel-Air, and those are the things you remember for sure. But I think it was just something that was new, that was fun. Again, as you mentioned before, just different.
Yeah.
Where the kids, like shows like 90210, were talking to us as people that were our peers, that
Right.
were our age. I was in college when this came out, so I was a little bit older, but I definitely felt it. I mean, I felt like I knew, what the trials and tribulations that he was going through.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and much like every kid did an Urkel impression, I feel like every kid attempted to do the Carlton dance in the 90s. I mean,
who
every
didn't?
kid and adult tried to do the Carlton dance. I know I did. I know I tried to do it. I couldn't get the feet going at the same time. It was he's one of a kind.
Well, why do you think it had such an impact?
I mean, you kind of nailed it. I mean, like I would say pretty much the same thing you did. I just feel like something just needed to change with TV, especially with like 90s. I don't know, 80s had like its youth culture and mall culture, but there was just something about the 90s that just like really honed in on young America and like young adults and teenagers and preteens. It just felt like there were so many more shows targeted for teens. There were so many more kid shows in the 90s. There was just so much. It was really the beginning of like the oversaturation in a lot of ways, but at the same time, I just think that there are just certain shows from the 90s that have really stuck with pop culture, and I think the reason why Fresh Prince did was Will Smith became like the biggest movie star in TV like ever, or one of the biggest stars ever. So I think that catapulted the show into its kind of it really made the show last longer because people are like, I can't believe he started on this sitcom at this point 35 years ago,
right?
And
then he was like the summer blockbuster guy between Men in Black, Independence Day. I know I'm like, those are the first two that I thought of, but I mean, just so many. iRobot, I Am Legend, so like he just was out there. I mean, obviously he's had his controversies in the past couple of years, so we're not forgetting that either, but we're talking about this show.
Yes.
And just the impact that it had at the time and kind of his impact over TV and movies. But
I think the theme song had a lot to do with it. I think there are the shows that, we talked about the Jeffersons and how they had a theme song that kind of preceded the show in a little bit. It kind of like was bigger than the show in a lot of ways. Like There are people who have never watched The Jeffersons but can sing that song. There are people who have never watched a single episode of Fresh Prince but know in West Philadelphia. I'm not gonna, and I mean, like, they can do that. I remember there was the Smosh games where they were playing acronyms, and in West Philadelphia, born and raised was one of the initials. And the girl Kimmy, who wasn't getting any of them right, it was the only one she got right. And so, like, that was like, oh, I got it. It was just one of those things, and like, it's just such a part of it. I mean, she was probably born when that show was coming out, so I mean, like,
if then, I mean, maybe even later.
So I mean, like, definitely while the show was still airing, she had just been born in the mid 90s. So yeah, I mean, like, it's just that, and I mean, I'll also kind of hark back to it. The Carlton dance kind of became its own thing, and I just think it was just a show that I think it also catapulted a lot of careers for it. Kind of started Tatiana Ali's music career, and Alfonso Ribeiro kind of like never really left the limelight, and James Avery also, up until he passed away, he was frequently in stuff, and it also like relaunched the career of Daphne Maxwell Reid, who replaced Janet Hubert. It kind of relaunched her TV career, and I think it was just a show that people just never forgot because there were so many different elements to it that were unforgettable. So like, I think that's ultimately why. The theme song, kind of the overall humor of it, the Carlton dance, and the fact that Will Smith became like one of the biggest movie stars ever. Yeah. I think that had a lot to do with it.
Do you think the impact that it was an African-American family in Bel-Air starting a show while there was also the mega hit of Beverly Hills and I Know 210 that showcased white families in Beverly Hills, rich, was kind of a good kind of counterpoint.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
I agree with that.
Yeah. I feel like it was an interesting time for it to come out because that was such a juggernaut, like right around that time. And then they came out, and I mean, I think obviously equally as successful.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of, particularly the beginning, like the first season of Fresh Prince, it's a lot about Will and also the Banks family kind of experiencing culture shock within their family. I think with Will growing up in a working class West Philadelphia, probably grew up in an apartment with his mom, living in this mansion in Bel-Air, but also like, he's kind of all, Carlton's a black Republican, and his family is very conservative, and so to him it's a culture shock, but him being there is a culture shock for them as well.
Right.
You and I both grew up, I mean, like, we both say we're never going to say that we were poor. I would say when I was very young, we were working class, and we kind of moved up to middle class eventually. But I went to a private school for 5 years, and I experienced some major culture shock, particularly with the upper class. Did you ever experience that? Because I know you also grew up in a working class.
Oh, yeah. So, yes. So where I grew up in New Orleans, it's called Algiers. It is the only part of New Orleans that is on the other side of the river. It was a big part that was expanded in like the 70s and 80s. Well, I mean, obviously my parents moved there in the 60s, but it was really growing and expanding in the 70s and the 80s with the oil boom in the 80s in Louisiana.
Oh, okay.
And so lots of people were transferring from Dallas and Houston to live in New Orleans with the oil boom. And so my neighborhood that you have been to is very much the blue collar. Yeah. Like, we lived next door to firefighters, across the street from police officers, lots of seafarers, merchant marines, all of those kind of employees, jobs, and occupations in my neighborhood. I went to the local elementary school, and in New Orleans, as in most cities, it's very districted out. And so other people around the neighborhood were in my school. And now there were a couple of people that lived in other little subdivisions nearby, and their houses were pretty nice. But it was when I went to kind of what's called middle elementary, 5th and 6th grade, that I started meeting the people that lived in the much bigger subdivisions that had like the 2-story houses. And it wasn't just one 2-story house on the whole street.
Right.
It was streets of 2-story houses. Now, there were only 1-story kind of like cottage houses in my neighborhood. So I had a friend, her name was Jill. I've seen her several years ago for her 40th birthday party, but we keep in touch on Instagram. So hi, Jill, in case you might be listening to this. So Jill had invited me to spend the night at her house in the subdivision in New Orleans called Tall Timbers. And I remember my mom dropping me off in this subdivision, and I knew I had seen it in my lifetime because it was next to where the Schwegmann's grocery store was where my brother worked. Okay. So I had seen it, but I had never been in the subdivision to see a house. And my mom was driving and I was like, these are like mansions. Like, what is this? Where am I going? And she dropped me off, and she had this beautiful brick house. We did not have a brick house. We had wood and siding on our house. Yeah. And it was just like, wow. And then I met other people that lived in that subdivision. I had a classmate, and his house was so bougie. There was a subdivision within his subdivision. Like it was sort of a private street within the street. They had like a laundry chute. I think you're going to talk about someone who had a intercom system. They had an intercom. We would beep each other. But what was crazy was Jill wanted to spend the night at my house. And after seeing her house, it was maybe one of the first times in my life at around 10 or 11 that I realized we didn't have a lot of money. Yeah. And I was just like mortified. I was like, I'm going to have to ask my mom, Yeah. And she was just like kind of surprised, I remember, because she was like, well, your mom let you come here. Why wouldn't she let me come there? And I was like, oh, I know she will. And so I kind of had to get over it. I had to be like, this is my house. Yeah. Well, when she came over, one of the things that was really different was a lot of the houses that were in the Tall Timber subdivision, you'll kind of laugh, were what's called a center hall colonial, where it's like you walk in, there's a stairs, there's a room to your right, a room to your left. You walk down the hall, there's a back room and another back room. So it's like 8 rooms and a couple of bathrooms, like first story, second story. And in our house, you could actually do a lap around our house. Yeah. So it was kind of like, I'll affectionately call it like a donut, and so like you could walk around the entire perimeter of our house. You couldn't do that in a lot of the houses in Tall Timbers. Yeah. She was so amazed by that. Like, it was really funny because I thought she was crazy. I was like, this is fancy to you?
I'm about to tell a similar story.
And so, like, it was just crazy how we both had different perceptions of our homes. She thought our house was so cool. I think we had the door on our house by the time I met her. It might have been just before it. But later on, we had the house. She thought our door was so fancy. Yeah. We also had that Econoline van. Everyone went ape shit when they saw our family van. Like, they thought it was the fanciest thing in the world. And I'm sitting here going like, my dad put the seats in. You know, like, our different perceptions of things. Later in life, of course, I went to school uptown to another public school. It was Magnet, and then I learned of even fancier houses in Uptown, Garden District, Lakeview, the Jewels, New Orleans East, and my expanse of richness really expanded. Yeah. Then to top it off, just other times where, like, I think I've told the story of when I was a high school teacher and one of the kids in my class, her father owned the local paper company, the paper mill, and talk about money. Yeah. They had money. And I just never forget, like, they had like a real physical library in their house.
Yep.
And I mean, it wasn't just like a few books in an office. I mean, it was like legit a cataloged library.
Yep.
And it was a collection of stuff from Napoleon and
Oh my God.
France and Spain and European stuff. And then they had like an African, taxidermied room, but it had like wallpaper that was made of like animal skin.
Oh my God.
Like it was just crazy. I mean,
That's crazy.
And so I think those exposures to money gave me always an appreciation for what I had. And in the sense of like, I think that's cool and that's great and that's nice, but I'm always just thankful for what we have here. And I love our house, and I don't need animal pelts on our walls to, have things. I mean, an intercom system would be fun, or
That
a
would be
laundry chute, although we only have one story.
story.
Technically. We do have a over the garage room, but I mean, it's just, my story with Jill to me was a great kind of example of like, I never knew we didn't really have money until I saw someone who had, and Jill's house wasn't magnanimous.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, I would say Jill's house was probably somewhat remnant of our house. But to my 10, 11-year-old mind, it was kind of like, I think Maddie and Grayson seeing this house the first time. I've never seen Grayson's house, but when Maddie and them were talking, they were like, they live in a mansion. And I was just like, what?
I know.
I was like, okay, thank you, Booze, but it's just, again, the perception of what you think money is or what you have and what you don't have is really just in your own mind. So what about you? Tell me your story.
Well, it's fairly similar to yours. I had, so I did experience... So my original experience, I've talked about this on the pod before, my original experience with realizing that we didn't have as much money as other people was originally in a negative way, because that was when the kid came over to my house, and then I kind of started getting called like white trash kid and all of that stuff.
Right.
And being very noted that I lived in, I lived in a very rural area. I lived in a very country home, kind of in the middle. Now it's in the smack dab center of like a highway, but back then it was out in the middle of nowhere.
Oh yeah, I could see
Central Thruway didn't exist back then.
Yeah.
And so when the first time I went over to someone else's house that I went to school with at this private school, I'd gone to a couple other houses, but they were all like, one of them lived like in my dad's neighborhood now, so it's like just a normal house. And but I went to one birthday party, I went to a sleepover, and this guy I guess he lived with his parents, and he lived in this, I mean, to me, it was a mansion. I mean, like, to me, because like my grandparents lived in a 2-story home, but it was not, in my mind, ever a mansion. It was just
the one on Warwick?
Yeah, it was just a 2-story house. I think because we weren't allowed to go upstairs when we were little, I think that had a lot to do with why I never thought of it as like a big house, even though it was. But anyway, I went to this kid's house, and he had an intercom system. He had a laundry chute. He had a dumbwaiter. I'm pretty sure he had like a maid, like a full service maid. I don't know if it wasn't like Alice from the Brady Bunch like lived there, but I think they had like a full service maid. And yeah, I just remember like walking through this house, and I remember we were all sleeping in so this was my first time experiencing an attic as an actual room.
Oh wow! You could like walk
it was like a 3rd story, and it was like you could like walk up there, and it had like AC. It was like an entertainment room. And that's where we slept, and so it was cool. It was actually really cool. It had like.
Do you remember where this was?
Yeah, it was in Central. I remember it was off of Sullivan Road, I think. Okay. Which there are a lot of really old houses kind of in that area, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that's where it was. My mom might know. I might have to ask her. My mom might know, because we went to church with this family, so my mom may have gone over there, but yeah, so I also went to school with, I don't know if this name is going to ring any bells for you, but because he was like a local politician, but I went to school with Woody Jenkins's kids.
Oh, okay.
And they lived, I don't know exactly remember where they lived, but they lived kind of closer to like mid-city, and they lived in a big ass house in mid-city. And that was the first time I saw like a study that was like a library that was like inside of a house. They had like a cellar in their house. Like I think it was a panic room, but like they had like I don't know if it was a panic room, but like maybe I might be making this up in my head, but no, they definitely had like a study. And there were like, I remember when we would go over to their house for like a birthday party, they would have sections of the house that were like roped off. And so it was like, I thought,
oh my God.
I thought I was in like the White House. Like
a
I thought,
museum.
yeah, like it was like there were places wrote. I mean, and I remember there was one time where they had like, I don't want to say like a security guard, but they had like someone like with an earpiece, like standing outside of a room that was roped off. Like we were not allowed to go into that like specific corridor. So yeah, it was pretty insane. When I had the first kid sleep over at my house that like ended up making fun of me, I was really, really hesitant on having other kids come over. But one time there was this one kid, I had never been over to his house, but I knew that his parents had a lot of money. I knew that he lived like I think he lived in Lake at White Oak. So he lived in like a very like, that's where we got married. Those houses are huge. So I knew that his parents were rich. So I was like really hesitant. I almost wanted to do the thing where I'm like, Mom, I'm going to ask you if Ryan can spend the night. Can you just say no so I can tell him no? Like I almost did that, but I'm just like, come on. Like if he's really your friend, he's not going to care. So it's just like, if he's really a good guy, he's not going to care. So he came over. And so even though he lived in a really big house, maybe he didn't live in Lake of White Oak because they all have big backyards, but he didn't have a backyard. Like he had like these houses that are all like on top of each other, and they had like the little rectangular small backyard.
Oh yeah.
I had this huge backyard that like went down a hill, and at the end of the hill, I had like a tree house. I lived in a pond. There was like a pasture on this side. There was woods on the other end of the street that had trails. Like we had a baseball field on our street. Like I had a very idyllic childhood. Like I lived in an amazing neighborhood growing up. So I will never complain. I had such a fun childhood in that neighborhood, and he loved it. I mean, he was just like, I love your house. I just remember he kept saying, he's like, I love your house. Like a part of me felt like he was like being overly nice because I got made fun of, but like there was another part of me that like, I was like, I think he really likes my house. I was like, I had like a really big deck that like my dad had built, because my dad's Ron Swanson, and he, he's Mr. Wood. He built that tree house, like, and you could because it went over a hill, there were all these different sections. You can go under the deck and you can like play under the deck, kind of like that scene in The Visit where they're all playing hide and seek underneath the house. I know that scene freaks you out.
Oh God.
That's what it always makes you think of, us playing like underneath the deck and stuff like that. And he had a blast. Like I introduced him to my neighborhood friends, and we all played baseball and
I think that's a really good point, and it's kind of what you make of it, because like I think the lesson for me was after Jill came to spend the night and she didn't have a reaction of like, oh my God, you're a pauper.
Yeah. Pauper. Yeah.
Like, cause that's what I was like, I know. We don't have that house. I wasn't ashamed of it after. And I wasn't ashamed of it ever before it. It was only like in that brief moment I went to her house first. Because like I posted tonight on Facebook that I always invited people over to my house after that. My house, again, I've talked about, I never had a curfew. My dad loved cooking for us. My mom baked. I mean, everyone was always welcome at our house. And, we didn't have a lot, but we always had a good time.
Right, and I grew up in the hangout house as well. Everyone always came over to my house and wanted to hang out. This is when we lived in Azalea Lakes, but that still wasn't a big house. I mean, that was just a little 3-bedroom.
Yeah.
One of Sarah's friends told my mom it reminded them of a dollhouse. So like it was.
Was that an insult?
I don't know still to this day, but my mom asked my mom. It rubs her the wrong way every time.
I know,
so.
That sounds kind of like an insult to me.
So yeah, I mean, like, but we had the hangout house. Everyone loved my mom. Everyone loved hanging out. Like we had rules and stuff, but I mean, like, we were allowed to watch R-rated movies. We were allowed to watch horror movies. We were allowed to stay up, and my mom would order Domino's and McDonald's, and like we had the fun house.
Oh yeah, and that's you just saying that just now kind of triggered one of my very first high school sleepovers with a friend who lived uptown. And like I've mentioned before, my mom pretty much let me watch anything on TV.
Yeah.
And I went to spend the night at this friend's house, and they were going to go get like some ice cream at like the local K&B, which is like a drugstore. They had their own brand of ice cream.
Oh yeah.
And I think they had asked what we wanted to watch, and it was a Friday night. And I said, oh, like, let's watch Miami Vice. It was a new show that was on. And they were like, we do not watch that kind of television in this house. And I just was like, okay. And I remember, like, I respected that. I was like, it's your house. I'm like, I was just making a suggestion. You asked. And so I remember when they came back, they actually questioned if we watched Miami Vice. And I was like, no, we've been up in Shelly's room and we've just been hanging out. I'm like, her room is so beautiful. Like it really was. I mean, I'll never forget it. Really, I have a very vivid memory. Her room was painted this hunter green.
Oh,
I will never forget it. Like I walked in and I was like, I didn't know that walls could be painted this color. Again, probably like my young 14, 15-year-old mind, my house was wooden and had just regular eggshell painted walls and whatnot, or wood paneling. But I just will never forget that because I just was like, oh, y'all are like snooty or something.
Yeah.
Like, and again, not saying anything bad about them, but my mind was just like, wow, that's weird. My mom wouldn't care if I was like, it's a cop show, but okay. So again, perspective is total, like just rich can be crazy, poor can be crazy, can be nice, whatever it is. So yeah.
Yeah. It's not how much money you have. It really is just the person.
It is. All right.
You ready?
So we've talked a lot. Are you ready to go over the pilot summary?
Let's do it.
Do it.
All right, Fresh Prince pilot plot summary. It's really hard not to sing West Philadelphia every time I see it, especially when it says in West Philadelphia. I'm going to do everything I can not to do it.
All right.
After getting into trouble in West Philadelphia, that took every part of me not to sing it. Will's mother sends him to live with his Aunt Vivian and Uncle Phil in Bel-Air, California, because she feels that Will would be safer there and learn some good American values. Upon his arrival, Will brings with him part of West Philly, his rap style and his behavior. The episode starts with Will banging on a door and singing "Back to Life" by Soul to Soul. Actually know how to play that on the piano. Tyler taught me how to play that on the piano. How random that is.
Life.
The Banks' butler, Jeffrey, opens the door, and Will, thinking it's Uncle Phil, hugs him before Jeffrey tells him who he really is, which was really funny.
It was.
Jeffrey then leads. Joseph Marcel's delivery is just so perfect. It's so funny. Jeffrey then leads Will into the living room where he meets his Aunt Vivian and Uncle Phil, who are amazed by his growth over the many years. However, when Will begins describing his plane ride, Philip becomes disgusted hearing his slang language, but this language is pretty typical to Vivian, who reminds Philip of how they used to talk slang when they were young. Afterwards, Ashley appears and meets her cousin Will. After hearing about the tennis court and pool that they have in the house, Will begins to feel comfortable thinking he is living in the lap of luxury, but Phil reminds him that he is there to work hard and stay out of trouble. Later, Will is in his room stapling his Malcolm X poster to the wall, which he is just going ham on that stapler. Jeffrey walks in and hands him his tuxedo for the formal dinner his Uncle Phil is hosting later on. Ashley also comes in and hands Will a painting of a flower pot she made for him. Seeing this, Will compliments Ashley on her artistic talents, which she is grateful for. However, she begins explaining to Will how she did not make the audition for the school chorus. Will believes that she should try to rap like him, and as she would not have to worry about messing up. The two begin making a short rap about Ashley's music teacher, Mrs. Berkeley, which she begins to enjoy, which was a very cute scene.
It was. They're cute.
Shortly after, Philip and Carlton enter the room. After greeting Will, Carlton takes a look at his Malcolm X poster, who Will considers to be his hero. While Carlton agrees Malcolm X was a great man, he looks up to his father as a hero. Seeing that Will has his suit prepared for the formal dinner, Philip gives Will some advice, telling him to just be himself and when in doubt, act as Carlton. Later at night, everyone is gathered in the living room. It is here that Will's flair for trouble begins to wreak havoc on the Banks' household. Everyone at the dinner table is quite surprised to find Ashley doing a rap song that Will had taught her when saying grace, which was probably my favorite part of the episode, her rapping the blessing.
Yeah.
This does not help Philip's image with his bank associates, and Will and the Banks get off to a rocky start. After the party, Will is sitting down at the piano playing a tune shortly before his Uncle Philip comes in and begins to berate him for his shenanigans. Will explains to his uncle that he does not appreciate being changed into something that he does not want to be, as he intends to be a joker and have fun all the time. Philip reasons with him that joking around is what gets him into trouble. Will then tries to twist things around on his uncle, claiming that he is the one with the problem, that he has become soft and forgot all about his origin. Philip then tries to set Will straight, reassuring him that he most definitely knows where he comes from, saying that he heard Malcolm speak and read every word he wrote, rather than just hang a nice poster of him on his wall, which was, anytime Uncle Phil gets in that like voice and he's like giving that like straight face and it's that James Avery is such an intimidating dude. If that was my uncle yelling at me, I'd be scared.
Yeah, he's kind of a big guy.
Before leaving, Philip tells Will to learn more about somebody before he starts throwing criticisms around. Tired and not interested in what Will has to say, Philip leaves to bed, but not before hearing Will play Für Elise by Beethoven on the piano, another song I know how to play on the piano, changing his perception of Will. Later that night, Ashley's in her room dancing to Will's Walkman. Will enters and begins. This is probably another iconic moment of the show that
and
everyone
it's like
remembers.
A meme that is running, a reel that is running rampant lately. It keeps popping up for me all the time. I love it.
So later that night, Ashley is in her room dancing to Will's Walkman. Will enters and begins dancing behind her until she turns around and spots him. Yeah, probably another great part of the episode, and you're right, it is something that has been memed and brought into the reels as of late. After she hands him back his Walkman, the two head out to look for a bathroom for Will to use. Will's trying to find a bathroom so he can take a shower and stuff. Ashley tells Will that she is very happy that he is living there and says he is like the big brother she never had. Will, however, tries to remind her of her brother Carlton, but quickly brushes it aside, saying she has a point. Searching for a bathroom, they knock on the bathroom door on the left and hear Carlton singing silly love songs by Paul McCartney and Wings, forcing them to go to the bathroom on the right with Hillary inside. Will asks her how long she's going to be in there. Hillary tells him to go away. She is trying to remove her makeup. Will says goodnight to her, but instead he and Ashley quietly sneak around the corner until Hillary comes out. When they see what she was really doing, Will busts her shouting, "I knew it!" So she just had like those mud masks that people used to do.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah. That used to be such a thing. End of episode,
yes.
By the way. But yeah, that.
Oh yeah.
I just remember like you'd have to sit there and it would like tighten your face, and so
it would change. It would go on like kind of wet, and it would be like really dark, and as it dried, it became like ashy looking. Yeah. Oh yeah. Totally, you'd get those like at the Walgreens or Eckerd's or wherever you could find them.
Oh yeah, so I mean, watching this pilot just made me want to rewatch the whole series, because right after, I think the second episode is when Jazz comes for the first time, and he shows up, and that's a character that I loved on the show just because he was such a lot like Waldo on Family Matters, or a lot like Sean and Eric on Boy Meets World. I just love I love kind of the dopey friend. That's always a character that I've always loved. So yeah. So go on Max and watch Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It is a trip to go back and watch, you are just flooded. If you watch the show as much as I did, you are just, by the end of the first episode, you are just flooded with memories. And the show still holds up. It's still really funny. And I can't recommend the show enough. If you've never seen Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, you need to go watch it. That's all I'm gonna say.
At least a few episodes. That one. There are lots later as well, like when Hillary starts dating like the weather guy.
Oh yeah, when he proposes to her, bungee jumping,
just crazy stuff.
And then of course there's when Will and Carlton, I guess they were like dancing for charity, but they were like doing like stripping, I guess, and they do the jump on it, and he like they do the dance, and he like swings them and throws them across the room. Oh, it's so great.
Yeah, so lots of good lots of good episodes.
All right. You think that about wraps up this one?
I think that'll do it.
All right. That about wraps up this episode of We Judge a Show by its Pilot. Thanks for tuning in. And if you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on whichever platform you're listening to this podcast on. That way you'll be notified every time we publish a new episode. You can also follow us on Instagram at We Judge Pilot Pod. We're also on Facebook. You can leave us a comment, suggest a show for us to watch, or leave some emojis in the comments. What you got?
All right, I have the crown for the Fresh Prince.
Nice.
I have the bank for the Banks family.
Nice.
The dancing, any of the three dancing, the disco ball, the male-female dancer, any of the music emojis. Palm trees to represent sort of like Bel-Air, because they have, Beverly Hills has the palm trees, but I know it's Bel-Air. The basketball, the dinner plate, any of the spa emojis for Hillary. The door, the plane, the tennis ball, the swimmer for the tennis court, the pool, the flower, any of the flower emojis for the art, any of the art emojis such as the art palette, and then the bathroom, any of the things from the bathroom for the final scenes.
That's a good one.
All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up. We're going to head out, but we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening.